Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Shelly, and I'm the founder of Bee City Canada. It's so nice to be with you. So let me get started and share my screen. So let's start with some true and false, shall we? First of all, to see if you know all this stuff, because if you know everything, maybe there's no point in having to sit and listen to my presentation. But I guarantee if you have the patience and you sit through it, you're going to know a lot more than most people on this planet about pollinators and about the situation that we're currently living in. So let's get started with the first true and false question, shall we? Okay, a way to help the declining bee population is to become a beekeeper, right? True or false? Second question, honeybees are the only important pollinator. True or false? 20% of all plants on Earth require a pollinator. True or false? Over the last 30 years, there has been a decrease in pesticide use in farming worldwide. True or false? Plants are better pollinated in rural areas, farmland, than in urban areas, the cities. Is that true or false? All bees live in hives, colonies. True or false? Okay, so if you decided to stick around, let's learn some things together. Okay, first of all, we're going to learn who are the pollinators here in Canada. What is pollination? Why are pollinators so important? And how's honey made? A lot of people are confused about that. So let's start with the pollinators here in Canada. There's the moth. There's the butterfly. That's the daytime of the moth. And then there's a hummingbird. That's the only bird here in Canada that's a pollinator. And then there's the wasp, really important in our vegetable gardens. And there's beetles. And that yellow and black thing, insect that kind of looks like a bee, that's actually a fly. Flies are also pollinators and very important too. But where's my favorite pollinator? The bees, of course. Well, around the world, there's about 25,000 different species of bees. And only about 800 to 1,000 here in Canada, about 4,000 in North America. There's only one honeybee here in North America, but they get a lot of the attention. So I want to share some things about the other bees, the native species of bees that have been here for thousands and thousands of years. First of all, they don't all live in hives. No, not at all. The honeybees do. Yes, and bumblebees also live in colonies, but most bees live in the ground. In fact, 80% of them live in the ground. And the other ones, they live in the hollow stems. So, are they all black and white? No, there are lots of different colors as well, different shapes, different sizes too. And do they all sting? No, boys don't sting, only the girls. And a lot of the bees, the ones that live in the ground, they don't sting either. Do they all make honey? No, they don't make honey, just the honeybee makes honey. The bumblebee makes a little bit of honey, but we don't take the honey from the bumblebee. Now, is it the bees or the wasps that are showing up at our picnics and around the garbage cans? Well, if you think it's the wasps, you're right, it is the wasps. And why is that? Well, that's because the wasps are carnivores. They eat insects, particularly they eat larvae. So really important in our vegetable gardens, as I said before. And bees, no, they're not carnivores. They're plant eaters, strictly plant eaters. So they're going to plants for their food. And have you ever seen anybody going like this and going a little crazy around the bees or the wasp? They're so afraid. Well, it's not the right thing to do because that bee or wasp can actually feel our vibration. It can feel our fear or anger. And it has that stinger to protect himself. And it will protect herself if it thinks you may threaten it. But if you stay calm in your body, they feel that too, and they're more likely just to leave you alone. So stay calm and breathe around these beautiful insects. Okay, A lot of people think that bees live in these kinds of hives. And if you're lucky enough to have a garden, maybe you've seen them out in the trees or even around your house. These are not honeybees. These are not bees at all. In fact, they're wasps. And you need to stay away because they will sting. They're usually hornets or yellow jackets. And in fact, if they don't like you, they'll send their friends after you as well. So let's talk more about bees, because they're my favorite pollinator. So do they sleep? How do they see the world? And what do bees eat? Bees sleep. A lot of times you can just find them sleeping in the flowers. Oh, they're so cute. A lot of the boys, you'll find them sleeping in the flowers. And remember, boys don't have any stingers, so you had nothing to worry about. So here's a bumblebee, got a little tired, going from flower to flower all day long is pretty exhausting. And you can see the pollen all over this little bee's body. So how do the bees see the world? Well, how do they see the flowers? Something so important for bees and pollinators. Well, if you look at that boy, that's how we see those yellow flowers, right? Different shades of yellow. But for a bee, the world is very different. They see ultraviolet light. So you can see that yellow flower now becomes white with red in the middle. And the other one, lime green, it's like it's a bullseye. So imagine you're flying high and you need a landing place. Something wants you to be there. Those flowers want those pollinators to be there. So where do the bees go for their food? I'm sure you know it. Of course, it's the flowers. And what kind of food do they get? Pollen. Yes, that's their protein. And the nectar. Yes, that's their energy. Now, the nectar is that sweet stuff. And if you have kids around the house, or maybe a spouse who loves sweet stuff too, what you have to do sometimes is hide it, right? Well, the flower is no different. It knows those pollinators love that nectar, so it hides it deep inside the flower. So how does it get it? It uses its tongue. Sorry to be so rude, but it uses its tongue, and it's called a proboscis. So I'm going to show you a little video here. So you can see here that the bees have pollen all over their body. So notice the bee. It has a fuzzy body so that the pollen sticks to it. In fact, one is positively charged and the other one is negatively charged. I can't really remember which one it is. So I'll show you this little video here. Now watch closely, because you're going to see that the bee wants to take some pollen home with it because it feeds the babies some pollen. So you can see on their back leg, maybe if you don't know it, that the bees have 6 legs. And do you know how many wings bees have? Do you think 2? They have 4. So on their back leg, they have a special place to put the extra pollen. It's called a pollen basket. So let's watch this together. So here's the bee. Look at how its tongue is ready to stick out. And you can see on top of its head, those are the antennae. That's how they smell the world and taste the world and experience the world, is from their antenna. So they can smell it. In fact, they can smell the nectar from an apple blossom 5 kilometers away. That's incredible, isn't it? They're so sensitive to smells. In fact, in the Netherlands, they have trained honeybees to detect the smell of COVID. So what the honeybee does, the honeybee that they do the test with, it sticks its tongue out when it can detect that COVID is on another human being. Pretty amazing. They've done this as well for diabetes and from other diseases too, cancers as well, because all these are chemicals and the bees are very sensitive to chemicals. And here, as you can see on this bee, what's that on its hind leg? It's those pollen baskets that I showed you. Because when you see that bee is taking pollen home to feed the babies. here, this is a honeybee. And you can see on this bee, it has 2 pollen baskets. And they weigh a lot, almost half the weight of the bee. So sometimes they have a hard time flying around. It's fun to watch. All right, so here's my question for you all. Why do trees and plants have flowers exactly? Why do you think they do? I ask these questions to kids and teachers as too, and sometimes they're not exactly sure. So I thought I'd ask you guys as well. Okay, well, you see, trees and plants, they really want to reproduce, right? Just the way we do. Of course, they don't have babies the way we do, but they have things called seeds. Of course, you're all familiar with seeds. Hopefully, you've all planted something and enjoyed the benefits of planting something, either the beauty of a flower or a tree or something delicious to eat. Well, here is a tree. It's a linden tree. So out come the flowers to produce the seeds. But they can't do it by themselves. It's not wind. It's not magic. It's the pollinators that help create this seed, help make this seed happen so that these trees and plants can reproduce and spread their seed. So that scent, that shape, that color, everything about that flower is to attract the pollinators. So here are plants in the ground, all the different colors again, all these different plants, all these different flowers. Is there not for our enjoyment, even though we'd like to believe that? It's really to attract those pollinators. Okay, so here's the only scientific diagram I would use because these diagrams, these scientific diagrams, they're not life. You have to go out there to see it. That's what life is. So look at the anther there. There's the pollen. That's the male part of the flower. Remember, the bee has a fuzzy body. The pollen sticks to it. Now, as it goes from flower to flower to flower, some of that pollen falls off of it and lands on another part of the flower, the female part, the stamen, the stigma. And when that stigma can detect that that pollen is from that same type of plant, the same flower, same type of plant, the tube opens, the pollen goes down this tube and reaches into the ovule where it reaches an egg and fertilizes, and that's how seed gets created. Okay, so what is pollination? Yes, it's creating that seed. Let me just stop here for a second because I really want you to understand, what does that actually mean, a seed? Okay, I showed you these things, right? These are seeds. But what else are seeds? Well, things like pumpkin seeds, almonds, pistachios, cashews, you know all those things. Those are seeds too, right? And also things like strawberries, those are seeds too. See the little seeds all over them? And blueberries, I love blueberries, delicious. And blackberries, all these kinds of delicious things. Well, also I had to empty my fridge to show you other things that are also seeds. Things like grapefruit and mango and pomegranate and oranges and apples and potatoes, like potato chips and french fries. Who doesn't like those? And tomatoes. What would we do without pizza and pasta? I don't know what I would do. Well, what else are seeds too? Chocolate too, that's a seed too. So if there were no pollinators, that means there'd be no chocolate? No. And if there were no pollinators, coffee, you're right, coffee bean as a seed too. There would be no coffee either. Imagine that. So what else? Well, pumpkins even. If there were no pollinators, there would be no pumpkins. What would the kids do at Halloween without the pumpkins? Well, things too that you may not even be familiar with, like cotton. Cotton is a plant. It has a flower. That means in order to reproduce, it needs those pollinators. So thank you, pollinators, because I really like my t-shirt that says Save the Bees. A lot of our medicines also come from plants. So without those pollinators, would we have those medicines? We wouldn't have those medicines at all. Now, let's all take a deep breath together, okay? Let's do that again. Now, if I was to transport you to another planet, would we be able to breathe? Of course not. Why can we breathe on our beautiful Mother Earth? Because of the plants and the trees, right? Through photosynthesis creates oxygen. so we can breathe. But where do those trees and plants come from? Seeds, right? From pollinators. So now, do you all understand why pollinators are so important? Okay, let me go back to sharing my screen now. Let's get back to our presentation. So what exactly is pollination? Well, it's a love story, isn't it? So here's a flower saying to the bee, be gentle, it's my first time. So let's talk a little bit about this honeybee, because it does get all the attention. So the things that I really want you to understand is that honeybees are incredible and fascinating, but they're also managed by humans. We put them in boxes, but that's not where they belong, is it? Absolutely not. In fact, they much prefer to be in the forest, in the trees, in the hollows of the trees, and they don't want to be on the ground at all. In fact, researchers have found they really want to be high, 15 feet at least, up to 50 feet high. They want to be high. But they're fascinating. They have ways to communicate with each other. They do a waggle dance to tell all the other bees where all the food is. Imagine that. And how is honey made? Well, they have a special place in their belly for the nectar. Remember, they go to the flowers, suck it up with their proboscis, and they put it in their belly. Then they add their secret ingredient from their belly. They go back to the hive and they spit it into the mouth of another bee. And then they add their secret ingredient, and then that goes into the mouth of another bee and another bee. And then finally, they put it into the cell, into a honeycomb, which may be that you've seen before. And then, but it's very liquidy. So how do they get that thick? Well, what they have to do is they flap their wings and they evaporate the water that's in the nectar, in that nectar ingredient, so that honey is made. Okay. So that's sort of what I wanted to tell you. Now, in each box, there's about 60,000 different kinds of bees, but that's a lot for the bee too. They don't really live like that naturally. They really would rather have smaller numbers, and they really don't. And that size of the honeybee hive that humans have created, that's like 100 years old, is a little too big for the bees. They like something smaller. And in fact, there's better insulation from the heat and the cold in the log homes that they have, in the homes from the trees. Okay, I want to share a little bit about my favorite bee. It's a leafcutter bee. So you can see it makes these perfect little circles out of leaves, not out of every kind of leaf. They're very particular. Redbud is one of the trees here in Canada that the leafcutter bees go to. So let's watch this little video to see how they make their homes.
Have you ever seen a bee dig a hole? This is a leafcutter bee. You won't find it as part of a swarm, and you won't find it in a hive. Leafcutters are solitary bees, so instead of storing honey in close hives made of wax, they have a different strategy. As you might have guessed from their name, they cut leaves. Using sharp jaws, the female bee cuts neat circles out of the leaves of roses, lilac, and pea plants. The plants aren't harmed by the donation, and the bee has an important use for the fragment. She holds the curled up leaf circle between her legs and flies to her chosen nesting spot. Favourite nest sites are long tunnels. The bees either find one in a hollow plant stem or a BB&B, or if they need to, they dig them out of loose material like dry soil. In goes the leaf, and another one, and another. Inside the nest, she arranges her leaf pieces into thimble-shaped rooms, leaves a store of nectar and pollen for food, and lays a single egg on top of the food hoard. Sealing up the room with another fragment of leaf, she creates a safe haven with everything a developing bee larva needs. But her work isn't done. She'll create up to 20 leafy nurseries in a single nest before she's done.
Okay.
Have you ever...
Let's just stop for a second. Okay, so this leafcutter bee can only lay 20 eggs in her entire life. So what she does, she goes out to the flowers, gets pollen and nectar, makes these big lunchbox, puts it in each of these rooms for the eggs, then flies off and then soon will die. And then over winter, that's how the egg will hatch into a larva and then into a pupa, and it will stay like that all winter long until it will emerge in the springtime. Now, if we go back to that honeybee queen can lay 500 to 1,500 eggs a day. So look at the difference between this colony of honeybees and these native bees who don't have that many babies in their whole lifetime. Okay, here's another bee, the mining bee, the Andrinidae. A lot of them don't even have stingers. And like I said before, most bees live in the ground in little holes, almost like little ant holes, but bees live there. But look at the difference in size between this tiniest little bee, it's called the Perdita, to the fairy bee, they call it a fairy bee too, to the largest bee, which is the carpenter bee, which can sort of fit on a quarter. Now you might wonder, why are there all these different sizes? Well, that's because the flowers are all the different kinds of shapes. You know, there's 400,000 different kinds of plants around the planet. So of course they have different shapes of flowers. And of course, every single plant out there wants to reproduce. So they need a lot of different kinds of pollinators. So there's different kinds of species of so many different kinds of, there's like 100,000 different kinds of moths and 17,000 different kinds of butterflies around the world. So imagine there's thousands and thousands of different pollinators, and they're all needed on this planet. Okay, so some things you may not know about bees, like they have a brain and they're pretty smart and they can solve problems. Let's find out the problem that researchers have given these bees. They wanted to see if they could teach them how to roll a ball. Let's find out.
The humble bumblebee has a surprisingly flexible brain. They can come up with the most efficient solution to receive a reward rather than simply mimicking what they see others do. Bees were taught to move a ball to the center of a platform. If successful, they got a sugary treat. They were taught by other bees, by fake bees held by scientists, or by invisible ghost bees, actually a magnet. But they didn't learn so well from the ghost bees. Real bees were better teachers. Rather than mimicking the conditions they were shown, bees went off script to solve problems. The demonstrations they learned from all involved yellow balls. This ball is black, not yellow, but the bee still chooses it as the closest ball to the center. She knows she doesn't need a yellow ball specifically. Any ball will do to solve the problem. This kind of cognitive flexibility is previously unknown in insects. Clever girls.
Pretty amazing, huh? So imagine for a moment that you're a pollinator. Okay, you can pick your favorite pollinator. Of course, I would be a bee. So we're flying around, right? And we're hungry. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you'd be happy if you saw this. Sure you would. What about this? No food here. What about this? Look at a balcony. Can you have flowers? Can pollinators fly high? Yes, they can. So can hummingbirds. So if you have a balcony at home, plant. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? I mean, yeah, great for people, but are there anything for pollinators? No. And what about this? This is probably the worst thing we're doing for pollinators. Spraying pesticides, insecticides, fungicides, miticides, and insecticides. This stuff is killing the pollinators. And it's killing us too. What about this? What about this? 401. So many of our farms are looking like this. What do you see here? Do you see biodiversity here? Do you see a lot of life here? No. And are the pollinators there? No. What about a farm that looks like this? Do you see all the different kinds of species? Is this biodiversity? Not only is this bringing insects, but it's bringing other type of life as well. Healthier soil produces healthier food, and that makes us healthier as well. Thumbs up here. What about this? Messy garden? Thumbs up? You bet. Well, the sad news is that many bees and pollinators and insects are disappearing from our Mother Earth, and they may never come back. So why is that? Well, if you look a lot online or you see research papers, this is what they'll say. The main causes are habitat loss, degradation and fragmentation, pesticide use, industrial agriculture, climate change, diseases, loss of biodiversity. Do you know that there's been a 68% decline in the number of species in the last 50 years? Startling, isn't it? Well, it's not that these things are wrong, but maybe the real reasons is because we have become disconnected from the land, from our Mother Earth, and we have sought to control her, to exploit her, rather than respect her and learn to live in harmony with her ways. Look at that farm on this picture. So many of them look like this. How sad. Now the honeybee, is it in decline? Well, a lot of people think that they're in decline, but they're not in decline in numbers. Now, how interesting is that? Well, they are disappearing year to year. They are dying because they're sick. Why are they sick? Well, we've poisoned their food. Where is the biodiversity for them? You know, the plants are their pharmacy. They need a biodiversity of many different kinds of species. They need to self-medicate. They know where to go for their medicines. Here are some statistics. 45% of honeybee colonies died in 1920, 1921, just this 2020 and 2021. But the US Department of Agriculture describes a 40% national increase in bee colonies. Now, how is that possible? They're dying, but they're increasing in number. That's because they're managed, right? Because the queen can lay so many eggs. So they have little labs all over the world, and they have little queen bees that they're raising, and they're giving her, impregnating her so that she can lay all these eggs. And how much does it cost when your bees die? About $150 for 10,000 bees and a queen. Okay, so they're managed just like farm animals, like cows and pigs and chickens. But let's talk about the native bees. Are they dying? Oh yes, they are dying. Because listen, the female bees, they can only lay 20 to 30 eggs, right, in their entire lifetime. 52% of them are in decline. 25% of them are close to extinction. Imagine, the bumblebee is close to extinction. Pesticide use, has it gone down? No, it hasn't. It's nearly doubled in the last 30 years. And the number of harmful chemicals are exploding. Even when one gets banned, the companies are very clever. They'll put together a few other ones that somehow get approved for use. Well, when I found all this out, I said, Shelly, what can I do? Can I do something? Well, I did. I started Bee City Canada back in 2016. And today there's 56 bee cities across Canada. I'm so proud that we have 2 First Nation communities too. We've got 53 bee schools and 16 bee campuses and a lot of other businesses that are helping out as well. So thank you to all of our family members. And this is my garden. It says bee friendly, as you can see. And behind that sign is a red bud. And if you look closely, there's little holes on it. So I know the leafcutter bee was there. I've never seen them chew it, but I know they've been there. And here's a picture of my garden and my neighbor's garden. I won't mention any names. Okay, so you can see that I have a lot of things. It looks kind of messy, right? Even though it is winter. But I don't rake up the leaves in the fall because I know that's where those insects want to have their families underneath those leaves. And in the spring, I leave it for a long time. I don't clean up because those pupa need to emerge into those bees and those butterflies and those other insects, those other important insects and pollinators. And I have lots of pollinators in the summertime. And it's like an oasis on my street. I can't seem to get my neighbors to change their ways. But what can you do? Of course you can do something. If you're lucky enough to have a garden, please do plant something. Plant a variety of native plants and trees and provide blooms for the pollinators from early spring to late fall. And when you're buying food, buy pesticide-free, non-GMO food and support your local farmers. And maybe eat a little less meat too. Grow your own pesticides-free vegetable garden and compost if you're able to do that. And remember, leave the leaves and be a lazy gardener and turn off those outside lights at night in the summertime. You could try learning how to save seeds and spend time outside and connect to the living life around you, to Mother Earth. Remember, pollinators can't vote, but you can. Here are some First Nation communities, First Nation community. These young girls want to tell you what they're doing to help raise awareness about pollinators.
Hi, I'm Sasha and I'm from Tikit. We are the first Indigenous bee city community in Canada. Hi, I'm Ken. And we're here with Jade Brigman, Brianne Brigman, and Dinah Brigman. This is
Oh, I just realized that I couldn't show the video. So you can see that on our website at beecitycanada.org. I apologize for that. Okay, let's go back to those true or false questions, shall we? So a way to help the declining bee population is to become a beekeeper. Absolutely not. You want to raise more unhealthy bees? No, we don't want to do that. What do we want to do? Plant for the pollinators. Honeybees are the only important pollinator? Oh my goodness. No, not at all. The only reason honeybees are so important is because we've decided how we want to do agriculture, because it's convenient to have monocrops. But is that the way nature is? No. Biodiversity. Our farms need to have biodiversity, lots of different species of plants and trees. And the yields will be higher. Not just the yields will be better, but our food will be healthier. Our food is our medicine, is it not? So all those other pollinators are very important for life on the planet. Because is it just people on the planet? We hear that saying that says 1 in 3 bites of food is thanks to a pollinator. But 1 in 3 bites of food for whom? Don't we share this planet with other animals? Of course we do, and birds too. Don't they rely on those pollinators for their food? Of course they do. 20% of all plants on Earth require a pollinator? No, it's 75 to 80% of all plant life on this planet requires a pollinator for reproduction to create that seed. Over the last 30 years, there has been a decrease in pesticide use in farming worldwide. Well, I wish that was true, but it's not. It's false. And GMO, when you see the word GMO, think pesticides, because those GMO crops have pesticides in them already. Plants are better pollinated in rural areas and farmland than in urban cities. Well, it turns out they're not, because our farmland, our countryside, is laden with pesticides everywhere. It goes into our soil, into our waterways, into our groundwater, and even into our human tissue. So even if you live in a city, it is important what you're doing, because there's more biodiversity in cities. Imagine that. Is that not crazy? More biodiversity in plants in a city than in our countryside. All bees live in colonies and hives. No, you know that. A lot of them they say they live in the ground and they live by themselves. They're solitary. So I'll end with a little joke. Looked at a bee, quick, get me a rolled up newspaper. Thanks for all you do for this planet, little bee. So we need to thank those bees and those pollinators for life on this planet. We just need to love them a little bit more. Maybe if we learn how to love them, we would know how to protect them. Thank you so much. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for being with me here today. And if you have any questions at all, or if you'd like me to do a free presentation anywhere, I'm happy to do that. And remember, we offer free presentations for students virtually around the country from kindergarten to grade 6. And if it's a high school class, we're happy to do that as well. So please, here's a page for our resources. The virtual learning. We have a pollinator pledge on our website too, with lots of information about planting and other things as well. And if you want to get in touch with me, please do so anytime. I'm happy to speak with you. Thanks so much, everyone. I really enjoyed sharing my passion about pollinators. I hope you've learned something. And if you have, please share that with someone. Thank you.